Okay, this video is to discuss undercutting door jambs and trim pieces in hardwood floor installation. I'm putting in some hardwood flooring in my house, which was built in 1984, and I have done several rooms, and I have run into problems with this undercutting. And so what I wanted to first show you is this is the living room. This was original with the house. And in the original installation, there is no undercutting of the door jamb. So if you look at this door jamb, you can actually see that they marked the scroll of that trim piece, and then they cut the hardwood floor with a scroll saw to fit this. And then you can see right here also around the corner, and you can even see here where this board was cut, the cut edge of this board. This trim piece was put on first and the flooring went down second. Now when they installed this, they started putting them on this edge, so these boards do not go underneath this. They run up to it, and there is an edge right there. But because this is where they started, as long as these boards were cut square, then that makes a nice flush edge. Likewise, this is a linoleum floor. This transition piece and the linoleum floor were done totally separate. There's a seam right here, and you can see that this seam is actually opening up. This floor needs to be replaced. This transition piece is designed to be flush with the hardwood floor, so it has a groove in it to accept those. Now, this is where they started laying the floor, so as long as they cut these boards square, they would fit into this. Where they would run into a problem would be on the other side of the room, where they would then run into the trim board on the other side. The light is not good here, but if you look at it, you'll see that basically here is where there's a gap according to where they had to measure, cut to length. And they were probably good to 1/16 of an inch or better, but you can see that there's a little gap there, okay? So this is the way that the house was originally done. So I wanted to start with that before moving on to the rooms that I've done. Now, let's see, how do I pause this? Okay, this is actually the other end of the living room where there is a doorway that meets the front hall, which is done with slate. And this basically is the same story. The slate is independent. The transition strip is the same. The hardwood floor has been cut specifically to the shape of this molding. Nothing's been undercut, okay? Okay, this is the first room that I did about 10 years ago. It was a living room. And when I did this, I took up the baseboards and I did undercut the trim piece. But I did not undercut the door jamb. I didn't understand how this was constructed. And given that the level is different on the two sides, I didn't think I would be able to undercut the door jamb. Okay, so as you can see, when I went to put this piece in, I cut a notch in it to fit around here, and you can see that it actually is undercutting the trim piece, because I did undercut the trim piece, but the jamb I did not undercut, and that leaves this gap here. Okay, this is just an example of my first job, my attempt. Now this transition piece is not flush. These boards actually go right underneath it, and then it sits on top of. It's not a seam between them because it rests over so it's not a flush transition piece on it, it's done differently. Now on the other side of this, you can see I did this a little bit different, based probably on my work, shoddy work on the other side. So on this one, I did undercut the trim piece, and then rather than to cut that notch, I actually cut a rectangular piece that is fitting this space here. So there's actually a little gap here. See, and that's so that doesn't actually have that gap. Now I did undercut also this part, but I did undercut this part of the jamb in order to slide under this transition piece. Okay. So that gives you, yeah, what I did on my first attempt. Yeah, it did have some problems. Okay, here's that same room, the living room, but this is where it has a transition into the kitchen, which is the linoleum. So it's a different transition, and this was actually where I started doing the hardwood floor, and so this piece was actually done later than that other transition I showed you here. I didn't need a notch. This was just cut rectangular, so you see there's a small gap there because I didn't fill that. I didn't cut a notch here, I just cut it straight across, but it was small. Now on the other side, I ran into a problem with that technique. You can see the door frame was not totally square to the hardwood flooring, so this piece really needed to be notched to get in under. This piece was undercut. This was not undercut. But by the time I got ready to do this piece, I couldn't get it in here any other way because I got myself kind of into a corner. So this piece was just cut square. It was just slid in from this direction. And so anyway, I ended up with a problem there. Okay, that's been there for 10 years, and I'm not sure what to do with it, but that was my first attempt. It was a bad one. Now, you can see here, I did undercut that, as I mentioned before. Okay, about 7 years ago, I did this family room, and I used the same technique that I just showed you for the dining room. I undercut the trim piece, but not the door jamb. I cut a notch. I notched rectangular notch for the pieces of hardwood floor as they came up against where the door jamb was. You can see this one, I kind of made a little error on the notch. Okay, because they were coming in perpendicular, I didn't have as serious a problem as I had when I had in that dining room where it was running horizontally, and I had a problem with a rectangular piece. Okay, now this year I've been doing hardwood floors in my upstairs bedrooms, and here's a case where I did completely undercut the door jamb, and the reason is because I'm going to be putting hardwood flooring in the hall, so there was no issue with having a different height on the two sides, so I just cut it straight across. That was not a problem. A case where you'll see how that works when it's done is in this closet. In the closet in here, I've already put in the flooring now underneath there, and there's no need to, in this case, there was absolutely no need to cut any notches whatsoever. It fit in entirely underneath, so that turned out to be quite simple. But there was no transition in that case. Okay, now here is a case in this bedroom where it makes a transition to linoleum in the bathroom, the master bath. And here is where I discovered how to undercut only half of the door jamb. After undercutting the door jambs all the way through, I realized how they were constructed, and I realized that in this case, I could saw up to this point on a slight angle like this. I could cut all the way through this one, and then up through here, and then I could, with a chisel, cut off this from this direction, and that would allow to undercut everything here with the exception of this piece. So what happens here is now I've undercut this so that on this side, it's not undercut. On this side, it is undercut, okay? Now, I can slide wood in underneath, okay? I did have to cut a notch in here. This notch is now for the framing timber, which is actually under there. And when this slides under now, this is totally undercut on the jamb, okay? And then this piece is also then undercut a little bit higher up, just as it was in the other rooms I showed you, for this transition piece to fit in. And now this is going to produce a superior result as a result of putting extra time and figuring out how to do that undercutting. Here's an example of the other side of the door jamb where I've actually already laid in the wood. This piece here did require also a little notch in the corner because of the 2x4 that is behind this. It actually bumped into that, but here's a case where you don't see that, okay? That notch is not perfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect because it's totally hidden. And now here, all the rough cuts are actually hidden by the smooth cuts of undercutting. So this shows how you can undercut this to achieve a better result. Thanks.